Trinity, will you repeat after me? God has a word, and it is for me, and it is for you. Good morning again, community. We are in these several weeks of exploring these 9 sayings that Jesus gave on a hill, on a mountainside. They are known as the Beatitudes. And these Beatitudes that Jesus gave are traditionally not what we in our culture have been thinking 2,000 years ago. For another reason for that is because when we think of this word bless, we often think of success, we think of power, we think of lots of material things, lots of wealth. But Jesus speaks these 9 sayings, these 9 blessings to a group of people that, again, culture had pretty much outcasted them, marginalized them. And here he opens up this sermon, this manifesto, by saying, "Blessed are you. Blessed are you who are poor in spirit. Blessed are you who are meek. Blessed are you who hunger and who thirst for justice. Blessed are you who are merciful. Blessed are you who are pure in spirit." And he continues to go on. And again, as you hear those sayings, they're really not categories that we would describe to people today in our culture. And yet, as we hear them, we recognize that Jesus is turning blessings on its head. He's asking us, I believe, not only the crowd, but more asking the reader this morning, the hearer this morning, to renew, to think about blessing in another way. If you were here with us a couple of weeks ago, we opened up with a definition of what it means to be blessed, because we understand that there's lots of sayings out there. But quite frankly, what we say when we mean blessed is that God is with you, that God is on your side. And so Jesus is inviting us to see this new brand perspective on what it means to be blessed. But it's also important to remember that these groups of people that Jesus was saying these blessings to were in real life circumstances. Again, it was a hard world back then as it is today. And one thing that we have to recognize when we hear them and when we see them and when we put them in our lives, they are not just beatitudes to attain. In other words, if you want to level up on spirituality, you don't have to go and pursue being poor. You don't have to pursue finding something to grieve over or figuring out how you can hunger and thirst for what is good in this world. No, we have to be mindful of that. Why? Because ultimately, that is our biggest enemy, is that we want more and more and more. And the avenues of getting more and more and more ultimately lead us into places that can do more harm, more damage to ourselves, and also with others. No, these Beatitudes are an announcement of witnessing that God, again, is with us. So this morning, we're going to look at the second Beatitude. And it's one, as if you first hear it, there's probably some internal thinking right now. Really, Tino, we're going to talk about this morning. It is grief. It is an experience when you lose something. Here's how the Beatitude goes. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Blessed are you who are mourning right now. Blessed are you who are grieving right now. I was wrestling with this particular text this week because, again, I tried to picture myself saying this to somebody who was actually grieving in their space in this moment. I mean, can you imagine me going to a hospital bed and saying, "Blessed are you who are mourning"? Or standing alongside with someone as they are laying their loved one under the ground and saying, "Blessed are you who is mourning"? It seems kind of off, doesn't it? I mean, how in the world can we even begin to talk about people who are mourning or who are grieving, who have experienced loss? How do we even begin to think about calling them blessed? And yet, this is the second beatitude out of the gate that Jesus proclaims. I think first we have to be upfront by acknowledging, yes, our awkwardness that occurs when we don't know what to say to someone who is grieving. In fact, we wind up saying something that can do more harm. Has anyone found themselves in that situation before? As a young pastor, and even to this day, I still have to watch myself. I go to hospitals to make visits, and at times I really don't know what to say. And when I enter the room, what's the first thing that pops up in my mind? How are you? Right? How are you? Or I was at a funeral service a couple weeks ago, and again, I found myself in the funeral line, not knowing what to say, and again, how you doing? And then I'm screaming in my head, take it back, take it back, take it back, and you ultimately find out that you can't take those words back. Sometimes we have to acknowledge that we don't know what to say, and so we just say, at times, cliches. For example, you might have heard this particular saying, time heals all wounds. Time heals all wounds. Now, I've not only received this, yes, I've also said it. And partially it is true, and it's also partially false. Because in my experience with human beings, yes, time does provide a little softening of the pain, of the hurt. It can bring some healings, but in the reality of things, there are still those moments, anniversaries, milestones, special occasions, and as those moments pop up, it's almost like it's starting fresh again. I've lost my grandparents now. They've been gone for 10 years, and they passed a month from each other in January and February, and every year in January and February, it still feels like it just pops up all over again. The pain, the hurt, the loss, the woulda, shoulda, couldas, if I could have just had one more word with my grandmother. So yes, at times, it can heal, but at the same time, grief is still real. It still pops up. There's another saying out there that says, just keep yourself busy. Keep going. Whatever you do, you got to keep moving. You got to press forward. Don't stop and take 5 minutes to check on your feelings. As a kid, my mom would always tell me to go clean up my room. And how I would clean up the room, I don't know if you're like me, I would put all the stuff underneath my bed, right? Thinking that somehow it would all go away. And I think that happens to us at times, where we tend to keep moving, where we find ourselves pressing forward, and yet we're still hurting, and we try to hide those emotions. We try to hide our vulnerability because it's what the culture says to do. There's another one. They're in a better place. They're in a better place. Whatever your beliefs are in that, there are moments when I will tell you that's just not helpful. Because I'm not in a better place. You know what that feels like for someone who has lost someone. I'm here and this is what I'm feeling. I am angry, I am upset, I am hurt, I am grieving. So pushing that idea away, it is not healthy. And then the last one, God must have gained another angel. I don't have much to say about this, but as your pastor, I'm going to say, don't say that at all. It is not helpful. It's not theologically accurate. I just don't like it, so please be mindful of when you are comforting someone, don't say those words. Now, I will say, those phrases I've just shared with you, and you probably have heard some others as well, they come with good intentions. I can see why we use those. But at the same time, it also mitigates the awareness of the person's grief. And ultimately, what it reveals that we, especially the church, capital C, have not been taught how to grieve. We've not been taught how to handle our pain, to process our pain, to handle our loss, our trauma, all those things. I like how Jesuit priest and author James Martin says, we are taught on how to require and acquire things, not what we do when we lose them. And that could be for all of us how we could define our culture's biggest problem is that we've been taught to gain more and have more, but deep down we really know that's not the way life ultimately works. Loss is a part of life. Mourning is a part of life. And I really do believe that in all of our differences that we have as human beings, I think one thing remains true for all of us, that we all experience the need to mourn. We all have a deep need for mourning. Now, I will also say I'm not speaking on the type of mourning that inconveniences us, right? Like, for example, how many of you know someone that has been really distraught over a sporting event? Okay? As all of you know, I'm a big football fan, and yes, I am a Dallas Cowboy fan. And just past January, I was so excited. I was talking trash to all the KC Chiefs fans out here, thinking that we were going to go to the Super Bowl. And then in that January playoff game, we were down 28-0 at halftime. Samara's out of town. She calls me. I'm not answering the phone. She calls Samaya to go check on Tino, and then she comes down there. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. I'm grieving this loss. I'm boycotting this team. I can't do this. Well, here in a couple of weeks, I'll probably bring out my jersey. But I'm not speaking on that type of grief, no. That's for a sermon for another day. But human beings ultimately need to grieve. We will always experience loss. And I share this that we do have this in common because, again, for many of us, we were raised in a religious institution, a religious context that kind of wore suffering, loss, and pain as a badge of honor. Like whatever you're going through, whatever pain that you're experiencing, whatever loss that you have had, you need to keep pressing forward, and God has you, and God's going to give you the strength. But yet at the same time, though, were we ever part of a community where we were given the permission to process our grief, to process our pain? Maybe let me walk alongside with you. Maybe we should go see a therapist, whatever it is, knowing that I am here for you. There's this incredible story in the Gospel of John where a friend of Jesus, Lazarus, is sick. And when Jesus is told that he's sick, they don't just go to him and say, hey, your buddy is sick. No, when they tell him, they say, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now think about what that imparts. Someone with a deep bond. And so those who are familiar with the story, we know that Jesus goes to see Lazarus. We know that he gets there and he's been dead for 4 days, and the family is grieving and they're questioning and they're wondering why. And yes, he resurrects Lazarus and there's this celebration, but sandwiched in the middle of that powerful prophetic story is this humanity that we see from Jesus. It's been called one of the shortest verses in the Bible, real simple words. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Where does this notion come from? To be truly spiritual means shutting off your feelings, your emotions, your grief, because I will tell you that's something that Jesus did not value at all. Throughout the Gospels, we see not only Jesus healing and preaching and teaching, yes, but we also see him weeping, sweating blood drops, experiencing loss. And so when we think about all of this heavy topic, just a few things I want to share with you about mourning. And the first thing is that mourning looks different for everyone. I know at times what we want to do is to assume that how everyone is mourning, they should do what we have done or how we have overcome it. And the worst thing that we can do to another human being in their time of grief and tragedy is to put more shoulds and shame them. If someone is not grieving the way I would or you would, yes, there are unhealthy ways to grieve, but the reality is we're all going to process grief in different ways. And I think giving ourselves space and giving those who are in need, giving them space, ultimately begins the process of healing. Secondly, I think there is a direct relationship between these words, these actions of mourning and being comforted. Blessed are you who are mourning, for you will be comforted. You cannot have one without the other. In order for you to be comforted, you have to be mourning. They go together because ultimately, grief that is not acknowledged can't be processed. And grief that is not processed cannot begin to heal. We can't just go from everything is fine to comforting me. No, like mourning is over here and comforting is over here. And sometimes we just want to run away from the mourning and ultimately getting to comfort. But ultimately, comfort meets us in our mourning. They go hand to hand together, like holding hands. I think it's interesting, again, when we talk about this, when I go back to the Gospels, and at the end of John's Gospel, the resurrected Jesus appears to those first followers. And how they recognized the resurrected Jesus was through his scars. The risen Christ, the Jesus, the resurrection Jesus, they recognized him because of his wounds. Because grief, loss, suffering, and mourning ultimately leaves marks. And yes, over time, those begin to heal. And yes, there are things that can happen that can rip them wide open again and lead you back to that moment. But the truth is, loss takes a chunk out of us. It takes a chunk out of you and me. But one thing we can rest assured is that even the risen Christ had experienced that. And I believe at a church at its best, community at its best, is where people can ultimately bring the fullness of their humanity to the table, the fullness of who they are. That means their joy, their celebrations, all that is good, but that also means, yes, the loss, the pain, and all the hurt. The Apostle Paul, who wrote this letter to the church in Corinth, said it best: if one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is praised and celebrated, all rejoice together with it. Now you are the body of Christ, the individual members of it. I love that. Essentially, what he is saying is that human beings are complex, and we can hold together lots of different thoughts, lots of feelings, lots of emotions. We can celebrate with those who need to be celebrated, but we can also weep with those who are weeping. We can hold each other. We can be a church. We can bring the fullness of our humanity together, our joys, our doubts, their questions, their celebrations, and yes, even their losses and their pain here in this community. As I continue to think about this, I've learned working alongside with parents and even being a step-parent, right? Working with kids, wow, they can teach us a lot. As much as I want to protect kids, as much as I want to protect Samaya, as she falls down or she hurts herself, we ultimately want to take that pain away. And yet in the process of growing up, falling down and getting back up again, it involves, yes, a lot of joy, but also it involves a lot of tears. A lot of bruised knees, a lot of hurt feelings. And who am I to try to tell them how they should respond to their pain? Because it's so often what we've done in the church. We put on this display, this facade that we have it all together, that we have bright, shining smiles, no pain here, no darkness here, and then we send people out. #blessed. No. Yes, God does love us. But we also recognize that everything is not always fine, that life is hard at times. It sneaks up on you, and at times can hit you like a ton of bricks. And that's why I believe the church, it has to be a place where people can bring the totality and the fullness of who they are, to find companions to carry that load, to help them. It's what I love about this beatitude. Blessed are you who mourn, for you will be comforted. This word in Greek, comforted, means parakaleo. I've been falling in love with this word all week, parakaleo. Ultimately, it means to come alongside. It brings a whole new perspective to this beatitude, doesn't it? Blessed are you who are in pain. Blessed are you who have experienced loss, for you will have somebody walk alongside with you. Parakaleo. You've heard me say all the time that we were never meant to journey this incredible gift of faith alone, to be independent. No way. The reality is that we are in desperate need of community. We need to be parakaleos, to journey alongside with people, to hear us, to see us, to hear our pain, to hear our stories. And yes, there is a challenge in that, because for me, I know the challenge is that I'm a restorative person at best. I hate seeing people in pain. I hate it when people lose somebody. I want to fix it, and I don't know what to do. And over the years, what I have learned is instead of trying to fix things, I can be present. I can just be present. I don't even have to say anything but hold that person's hand, give them a hug, a side hug, and let them know I'm with you in this. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm hurting. I hear that, but I'm not going anywhere. I am with you in this journey. Can we be a church parakaleing for one another? It's a community of people who have gotten together, gotten our differences out of the way. Yes, that makes us unique, but ultimately pressing forward, knowing that we are not alone, that God is with us, and that we are with them. One of the goals for us this summer was to develop a care team, was to put a care team together here at Trinity. And we did this by opening it up to you all, and you all responded, and we have 12 people that responded to this incredible care team that is going to be put out, and some of them are already doing the work of caring and calling and loving on you. And we're going to bless them next week. We're going to commission them, but it's something that I'm excited for here at Trinity, because that is my hope and prayer for this community. That, yes, we will be a community where nobody carries it alone. And that means you may not get to know everyone in this growing community, but my hope is that you will find someone or somebody or a couple of somebodies who can carry that difficult time that you are experiencing, that will ultimately say, hey, I got your back, that you're not alone. They won't minimize your pain or your hurt. Instead, they'll walk with you in it. That's being a beloved community, which is why I believe a church at its best blesses those who mourn because they are no longer mourning alone. That is truth. My hope and prayer here at Trinity, whatever we do well, whatever we don't do well, fix or improve, whatever, at the core of our community will be a place where nobody's alone, where nobody's unseen, where nobody's unheard, where everyone has somebody who says, okay, this is hard, this is difficult and painful, but I promise you will never have to do it alone. Can we take in those words this morning? Blessed are you who are mourning, for you will be comforted. That is good news.